almost wasn't gonna make this, but then I realized that it's very important to me that I make this video. The video won't have many, if any, visuals. This isn't a visual affair. Go do your laundry or something. I'm Epop Pixie. My most viewed videos and best friends come from my time in the Moomin fandom. I first encountered Moomin Valley through this DVD of Moomin Summer Madness, one of the Fuzzy Felt adaptation stuff. I wouldn't really get around to, actually getting into it until 2019 when I was around 11. I was roped in by the YouTube community, introduced first to the Snuffmanship, dooming me from the start. I latched onto the character Snufkin, as well as a few of the female characters. There weren't many to latch onto that weren't too old or too young, so I eventually put myself into a little box with the young adult Mimble Jr. and the rather feminine man Snufkin as my favorite characters. I didn't know much about Moomins as a whole, aside from the YouTube videos I watched, but I would still share it with my, at the time, best friends. This time in my life was very turbulent, so I actually didn't remember I had shown them until I came back into touch with one of my past friends. At the time, like every year, my grades were horrible. Nowadays, I think this was due to inattentive ADHD, but since I'm not diagnosed, I can't say for sure with a good conscience. What I can say, however, is that I did not care for work. I spent most of my days just in my head, daydreaming, or just spacing out. They actually thought I had silent seizures because of that. I just lacked discipline. Also, just like every year, my parents were very concerned. My school set me up in this little counseling program, but since they were focused more on anger issues and emotional regulation and all that stuff, there wasn't really much that could be done with me there. Since I am chill to a fault, I don't feel emotions that strongly, and never really have. At least not outwardly. I remember we had these performance sheets our teachers would mark up, and I always got the lowest score because I wouldn't do my homework and wouldn't focus. Wouldn't do anything at all, actually. My parents and teachers both tried to ask me why, and I couldn't think of anything, at least not anything that didn't make me seem lazy. Eventually, they came to the conclusion that it was the school environment making my grades suffer. An important note is that I didn't go to a regular elementary school. I went to this, lottery school made for kids whose parents worked in the area. Basically a public school that treated itself like a private school. It was a uniform, too. A lot of the kids there were squarely upper middle class, and I think I was one of the only kids whose parents weren't very well off. Which isn't to say that I wasn't a spoiled child. I was an only child for years, how could I not be? Most of the kids were actually chill, despite my self-isolation and general annoying behavior. I hissed at a guy once, and nobody liked to talk to me. But one time, this one girl I didn't really like, and my best friend showed me this Google slide. I didn't know it was them at the time. It said that it was from my stalker and that I was fat and ugly. I didn't really find it offensive. I just found it weird. I didn't even really care much when I found out it was from my best friend because she told me the other girl told her to do it. Part of me believes they were just trying to get rid of me, but like I said, I didn't care. I didn't care about anything. But my parents and every other adult in my life at the time believed that I had, some sort of, really upset feeling and, betrayal and whatever. I kind of do, but it's not that bad. It wasn't ever that bad. And they held on to that notion that I was ostracized by my peers even years later when really I was just a little dipshit. So because of all that year I would switch schools. It was near the end of the year, so it wouldn't really matter all that much. And I would be sent to a combination class with the grade below me since my grades were so bad. I would try to use Moomin as a tool to make friends, but it never really worked. In fact, the only time that I did talk about it in depth with one of my quote-unquote friends at the time, I told her that Snufkin was gay, and then she said that she hoped her boyfriend in the future would be gay, so I just kind of was like, okay, and just didn't really want to interact much more. I'm pretty sure those kids got really sick of me really quick. I wouldn't see them after the year ended. I remember that the school had Tumblr unblocked for some reason, so I spent most of my time looking through Moomin incorrect quotes before eventually making my Tumblr account not long after, for the sole purpose of submitting an incorrect quote, because I think one of them had submissions open. I would also join the Moomin Amino during this time. I was still at the age where I was extremely unaware socially, and I wanted to make friends with people in the community, but I didn't really know how to. I didn't read the books much, and I didn't watch the show much. In fact, I found it kind of boring. As COVID rolled around and I was stuck alone, I think I just wanted to find anybody at all. I had no contact with my friends from my old elementary school, and my new one I wouldn't make any friends at. At some point, I would actually try to align myself with the fucked up, not safe for work side of the Moomin fandom, but I luckily didn't get too sucked into that due to the fact that I wouldn't be interacted with and I was too scared to interact with anyone else. My past rejection and reflection how people didn't really like my presence in the past made me a little anxious to talk to anyone at all, online or offline. So I didn't really directly talk to anyone, which I'm thankful for. I really, really wanted to fit in. Both on Tumblr and Amino, I would try really hard to be funny. But the thing is that I wasn't funny in the regular way, or never tried to be funny in the regular way. Even now, I still try to be funny. I still do. I've always been a tryhard. Nobody was too receptive. In hindsight, I could never really integrate into anything I was very interested in, and I would eventually lose interest due to the fact that I didn't mesh well with anyone else, and I had a fundamental misunderstanding of the characters as a whole. In that time, I would be interested in Animaniacs, then Kaiba, then Encanto, then Winx Club. They wouldn't last long, and I would linger in the Kaiba fandom for a little while since I had this one guy who would roleplay with me a lot. We were the only real active members of the Kaiba Amino. Things would change when I came across the YouTube channel Mushroom Soup. I had real-life friends at this point, although I legitimately, forced myself into a queer friend group during that time. They were chill, though, to be honest, until I learned that one of them was not a good person. Mushroom Soup wanted to create a silly fandom, and I shoved my fear aside and emailed him, wanting to be a part of it. This was still under the pretense of wanting to be in the community in a big way, and the slightly disingenuous secondary motivation of wanting to be popular by being in something made by a popular person. I would email him random things sometimes, just to stay on his favor, and impress him, I guess. Eventually he would start a Discord server, and I would download Discord just so I could join. I actually had an account before then, but I didn't use it much. It went very well, and I would eventually start uploading Moomin content again, this time being memes. My content would actually do well in this time, despite being low quality and made for the sake of clout. I would eventually put more effort, but the moment I started putting more effort in, I felt extremely jealous. And that jealousy was completely unfounded. I didn't deserve anything for my subpar fanfiction and nonsensical meme videos. I didn't really add anything. It's worth noting that at the time, even now, I was never interested in Moomin as a whole. I have to stress that. I was never interested in Moomin as a whole. Not really. The people I was jealous of were genuinely passionate about Moomin and its lore and its subtext and all these things that I was just never interested in. I was never truly interested. I just liked the one ship and the one character. I didn't even like him as he was. A wonderful example of this, I feel, is my situation with the Moomin comics. My mom bought me a big book with the first volume of Moomin comics in it. I never really read them, and I can't really remember most of the stories in it. Alternatively, however, a little bit after I got that, I got a huge hardcover copy of the manga Pure Trance by Junko Mizuno. I got it from a comic book shop in LA. It was adults only, but my mom flipped through it and didn't see anything concerning, so she just let me buy it. I read it front to back, and it became my favorite book. It spoke to me, truly interested me. I could still remember its plot and most of its characters. There's even a few panels of it that are, embedded into my brain. I brought both books to school, but Pure Trance would spend most of its time outside my backpack being gawked at, and my Moomin book would be in my backpack the whole time since I didn't think of any reason to read it, or look at it, or anything. Which is crazy, by the way, because Pure Trance isn't even a book I could read at school because of the amount of nudity every few pages. I would get into Winx Club more intensely during this time, as well as doll collecting. Eventually, a vague idea I'd always had in my head would begin to take shape into something more fleshed out and complicated. Ever since I was little, I imagined scenarios in my head in which all my favorite characters would meet, particularly fueled by a Bendy and the Ink Machine comic I liked, where they hung out with characters like Mickey Mouse and Felix the Cat. Me and my friends that I mentioned way earlier, when I was young, would play out these scenarios, but I think I was the only one that would still think of them after the game was over. I drew little comics about these ideas all the time, dubbing them Also. In my Moomin phase, this concept would be used for my idea SFC, or the strangest freaking crossover. Named such because none of the characters included had any sort of relation to each other aside from being something I was interested in at the time. I actually made this before I had my second wave of Moomin hyperfixation, and in that time the cast would comprise of Blueberry Muffin from Strawberry Shortcake, Barbie, Sonic the Hedgehog, and Snufkin. I'd resurrect this idea as Also again when I got back into Moomin. While I did like the idea genuinely when I resurrected it and also before, And to this day, I still think about it very frequently, like music videos in my head and all that stuff. I also viewed it as a way to fame, a way to popularity, a unique idea that could lead me somewhere. Are you sensing a theme? Can you see where this is going? I never got much recognition outside of my little circle in Mushroom Soup Snarmy community, which I would be fine with until I looked at my Tumblr likes. Nobody seemed actually interested in my ideas, and it frustrated the hell out of me. I would try many other avenues to recognition, but I would never really be satisfied with what I got. And I would still look at those people who genuinely cared more than I did, people who tried less, people who just made art for art's sake, and I would feel jealous. My crossover would cause me so much mental anguish that I wouldn't want to continue, but also desperately want to keep at it in case a substantial amount of people might appreciate the effort I put in. I always tried too hard, even now I try too hard, and it poisoned my experience. No idea felt new, yet I also felt too different for anybody to identify with my art in any way, which lingers. I wanted validation for my art so bad. It still hurts that the top post of my also blog on Tumblr is a little bit of word vomit about Snufkin swallowing a paper towel roll, and it still hurts that my most popular video is something I took minutes to make and thought was unfunny the moment I uploaded it. I also became fiercely protective and close-minded when it came to ships. As the Snorkmaiden x Moomin x Snufkin ships became a little bit popular, it started to piss me off since Snuffman wasn't really as popular anymore, I guess. And the consensus I'd been given for years since the start, since I was inducted into the community, was that Snorkmaiden and Moomin were an awful match and that Snufkin wasn't interested in women. During this time, I would have a relationship with somebody who was quote-unquote socially responsible to a fault and was polyamorous. I wasn't, but would also do anything to appease her to get her praise back. She wasn't withdrawing from me at all. In fact, she was absolutely crazy about me in all the wrong ways. But still, I really, really wanted that goddamn attention. These notions and the way I viewed her would birth some borderline phobic beliefs towards certain types of relationships, but somehow only in media? Like, this would only really apply to media, and I wouldn't really care in real life with actual people. Once this relationship imploded, I delved even deeper into this way of thinking, and I eventually came to terms with the fact that at this point I was a piece of shit. I never talked to anyone about this because I didn't want all my online friends to up and leave me. I would get over it on my own, mostly, but the lingering negative feelings morphed into an aversion to all things Moomin, and eventually I couldn't stand being in the fandom. It was jealousy and fear and rejection and the feeling as if I was betrayed by this thing, this story, this concept, something that wasn't sentient and wasn't able to hurt me. So I stayed away, and now even I'm not a Moomin fan anymore. Even as much as I want to be, I just don't have the energy for that, and I'm not genuinely interested in. I can't really interact or do anything without feeling the guilt that I don't belong there. I'm taking up space in a conversation that I can't even really add to in a meaningful way. There's only so many ways you can say Snufkin is gay before it just feels like you're on autopilot searching for things to say. So where does that leave me? For a while I was just normal. I am mildly fixated on dolls every once in a while when I found a pretty one that I really, really liked, which is something that I still do and have always done, as it's been a lifelong interest of mine. I always liked 2000s media, and it was of no surprise to me that my next hyperfixation would be something similar. I got interested in Puka in July of this year after being recommended a video about it. It had a female main character, designs that appealed to me more, and characters that caught my interest in a genuine way, and it definitely helped that most of them were human. I would also become enraptured by the lore, and now spend most of my time looking into it, which is a little frustrating because not everyone knows and I keep hearing misinformation get thrown around, but even I was once a purveyor of misinformation, since that's just what was fed to me by the fuck-ass YouTube channel that gets all its info from the wiki that makes up important shit for no reason. I can't really get mad, because not everyone can know the things I know because they probably haven't looked into it the way I have. I get the same feelings I did with Moomin with Puka, just like sort of in reverse. Like, I feel like I'm being a buzzkill by focusing on lore and canon and detail so much. Alongside that, I still feel inferior. Like, so many people in the fandom seem to be at least acquainted, and it peaked years before I even heard of it. I'm still too afraid to talk to anyone that much, and I still can't really seem to make my own little way into the wider community. I feel particularly envious of Sega Cat and Yoink Worm on Tumblr. They're actually goated. I keep finding them randomly on different social media by virtue of them making stuff about Puka and me looking for things about Puka, and I really hope they don't think I'm stalking them. I just want to look at the pretty thing, okay? I always have a bit of an outsider vibe, and the only reason I actually don't anymore with Mushroom Soup and the friends I've made through his community is because we've been friends for long enough that some of our personalities have rubbed onto each other and we all interact in a very close way. Actually, thinking about it more, even despite that, I frequently get the vibe of just being unwanted, but that's really a me thing. Just one of those things that your brain does, I guess. Anyways, you're probably asking, why so personal? Because I wanted to be. I felt compelled to state the full reason why I wanted to escape. Because it's not as simple as just getting a new hyperfixation. And particularly because I have a fear that this hyperfixation will end up the exact same way, just in a different form. If you made it all the way to the end, I appreciate it. I'll be back on my usual shit soon. Gotta make some Puka stuff. It's just gonna be a little bit hard to come up with ideas and harder to actually execute them, as I'm really trying to put more emphasis on my art and drawing out my ideas. But I will see you all soon.